journey beyond imposter syndrome. This is where I invite you into a space where high achievers and spiritual leaders converge to redefine success and self-worth. By sharing transformative stories and engaging with thought leaders, this podcast serves as a roadmap for navigating the complexities of imposter syndrome. It's an intimate look into overcoming personal barriers tailored for those who value wisdom, leadership, and intuition in business and life. Join me at the Humble Warrior Podcast with Alani Bankhead. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast, folks. Today we're going to be having some real talk because ish is depressing right now. The world is imploding. The international world order is radically changing. Markets are crashing. Everybody's worried about a recession. The world is becoming increasingly tribal every single day. People are scared. And if that's you today, I want to acknowledge the fear that you're experiencing because it is very real and it deserves to be heard. And that voice also comes with a second thought of, I'm only one person, right? I know I'm capable of doing a lot, but I'm only one person and there's so much broken that needs to be fixed. I am not enough. Hint, hint, this is core imposter syndrome language coming at you right now, okay? But what I'm here to tell you is actually you don't need to be scared. I'm going to say that again because I want this truth to sink into your bones and into your soul, and I want you to fully receive it today. You do not need to be scared. You don't need to worry about what's going to happen. We are going to be fine. So whether it's your business, your finances, school, whatever, remember that this whole podcast, my entire business, everything that I do is focused around the truth that you can create whatever reality you want. And so I'm going to share a little bit with you guys about my own journey of struggle in recent days. It is no secret that I am still affiliated with the military. Now, everything I'm saying is my own opinion. This has nothing to do with my unit or anything like that. But the reality of my historical experience is I am in a very male-dominated space. I am a woman. I am brown, right? They have been erasing data and stories of historical diversity, equity, and inclusion heroes off of the Department of Defense's websites in the United States. So as of the time of this recording, they're estimating about 26,000 images have been taken off of DoD websites that depict firsts by DEI heroes. And listen, I'm not going to get into a political debate about A, politics, or B, DEI and its merits or any of those things. I'm just acknowledging the reality that it is very easy for people who are different than others to feel discriminated against, which is why DEI is so important, right? But let's look at the actual behaviors that are happening. So whether or not you believe in DEI, the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Lisa Franchetti, was fired. Top Navy person happens to be a woman. The Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Linda Fagan, fired. Number one person. The Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, also fired. Okay, now, all of these individuals, allegedly, it's being said, only got their positions because they were women, because they were people of color. So what do you think that tells my unhealthy, insecure parts, right? It says that because I am a woman, because I am a person of color, they're probably going to fire and get rid of me. Now, we're control freaks, right? Humble warriors, if you are struggling with imposter syndrome or self-doubt, one of the things that we do to overcome that is we control our external circumstances as much as possible so that we can prove to the world that we deserve our positions, that we have value. And I'm here to tell you that the only way to create the world and life that you really want is to understand that your value does not exist outside of you, it exists within you. Okay? So, I'm also going to keep it real about some of my past professional experiences. Over the last 20 plus years that I've been affiliated with the military, I've been told at various points that, oh, you only got that job because you're a woman. You only got that job because you're brown and they needed a token. I'm here to tell you, fuck you. Right. To those people who said those things to me, fuck you. I didn't have the courage to say it back then because I had to be the model minority and be all proper and not be offensive and suck it up and take it on the chin and all those things. I'm not doing that anymore because I understand my value and it doesn't come from them. And I surely am not going to be deriving my value from anybody whom I don't respect as an individual. And trust me when I say, as someone who loves people, it takes a lot for me to get to a point where I don't respect you as a person. I even worked for the top Air Force official who was a woman at the time. And one of her top aides, a very high ranking person, I'm not going to give all the details away, at one point told me she had only been selected for that position because she was a woman. Now, at the time, this individual, although we worked together, I wouldn't say that we were particularly tight. It wasn't one of those things where sometimes you say something that might be slightly inappropriate in confidence or you might gossip or whatever. No, this was someone who was supposed to have her back, who was supposed to be her champion. And this person was telling me, a subordinate, that the boss didn't deserve to be there. Now, young Captain Major Alani, again, was so shocked at the time, I didn't say anything. I was baffled and mystified. Alani now says, go fuck yourself, bro. Okay. Because that person had the pedigree and the background to have that position, and they did an excellent job while they were there. And I'm not saying that because I worked for them. I'm saying that because I was in the room on Capitol Hill, in Prime Minister's office, in the limo, when I'm hearing all the private conversations. And this person cared so deeply for the mission. They fought so hard for the airmen. And that is my only criteria for determining whether or not you really deserve my respect, is how much do you care to serve other people, right? Additionally, I wrote this post last year on LinkedIn about my first time in the Middle East when everyone before and after me got a Bronze Star. And at the time, the young captain that I was, I internalized that event and used it as evidence to show that I wasn't good enough to myself. Now, a couple of people were like, you're a piece of garbage because all you cared about was getting a bronze medal. Hi, not the point, bro. What ended up happening that shocked me, though, was hundreds of people commented on the arbitrary and subjective nature of medals and also their own stories and pain points where they were ignored or blown off despite their sacrifices and the incredible work that they did. Right. So I knew inherently that metals and fabric didn't actually decide your value as a person, but I didn't realize, even as recently as last year, how many people and stories existed about the ridiculousness of metals and value and these things that we like attribute power and prestige to that probably don't deserve that. Right. But ultimately, why I share these stories about my past is because at the time, I felt unworthy and unable to change my circumstances. So even though I was still going to do everything in my power to control the outcome and show people that I mattered, the reality was that I was worthy just for being a human being. It took me a long time to figure that out, by the way. Okay. Now, when I really dig into my story, what I can acknowledge and own now is that all of that was an illusion that I used. So they were excuses that I received from other people. I internalized them, or maybe even I made them up in my head to explain away certain behaviors so that I didn't have to self-actualize. So I bought into these lies that people told me about myself. But again, as I mentioned, I realized over time that my value was not defined by any piece of cloth that I wore, including my rank. Now, you today may be scared and hurt. You might be feeling undervalued by the world. These stories might resonate you. And I'll be honest, there are even some people who are really scared that civil war is going to come in the United States. And guys, despite the craziness, I want to speak this truth to you again. You are going to be okay. And in fact, not only are you going to be okay, you're going to be better than okay. And the truth is that there is much more in your power than you realize or you're giving yourself credit for. Now, I can help you shift your perspective, but I need you to be 1% open to the reality that your fear can be transformed into empowerment. Okay. Now, let me tell you about 1% and why they can change everything. Enter Sir Dave Brailsford. He actually was the head of British cycling. He got the job in 2002. And at the time that he took over the job, they were like bottom of the barrel in the world, right? So in British cycling's 76-year history, up until the time that he took this job, they had won a whopping one gold medal ever in the history of British cycling. That's really bad, okay? But he took over, he started implementing these 1% improvements, which we're going to talk about and dissect here in a little bit, right? I want to talk to you about what he created. So 2008, Beijing Olympics, 7 out of 10 gold medals in track cycling were owned by the British. 4 years later, at the London Olympics, they did the same thing. 70% of those gold medals were owned by the Brits. Not bad considering that in their previous 76 years, they'd only gotten one, right? His team won multiple Tour de France's, the most epic cycling event in the world, and they dominated. And what he used is what he calls marginal gains when it comes to cycling. So he broke down every element of cycling and he committed to improving each element by 1% every day. And what he realized and hypothesized at the time that we now know is true is when you improve by 1%, so these marginal gains, you will create significant gains over time. And Sir Brailsford, in his own words, actually talks about when he took over the British cycling team, he said the podium felt too overwhelming at first. So the idea of where they were to where they wanted to be was so overwhelming, he could not envision it. And so he knew he had to break it down into smaller chunks. And that is exactly what he did. Now, I have more to share with you about Sir Brailsford and the British cycling team, but I'm going to put a pin in this for a second. The best is yet to come. But first, I want to talk about some examples from the past that prove that one person with one more person, with another person, can change the world. Because I know right now you're thinking, I'm just one person, what can I do? Let me share with you what's been done. So I'm actually going to start with one of my favorite examples, the Tuskegee Airmen. So these guys historically are known as some of the first Black aviators in the military. And they've always been very mythological for me. There was something about their story that always hit me really deep in my soul. And I didn't quite understand why, right? We're very different. Even though we're airmen related, they were actually part of the Army as part of the Air Force, right? But the Air Force didn't exist at the time. Yeah, we're like both brown, but like they're men, they're African, I'm Latina, like still different, right? So I didn't understand why the story resonated with me so much. And then one day I realized I don't understand why these men who at the time that they fought for the United States did not have equal protections under the law. They did not have a right to vote. There were all kinds of crazy things like segregation happening, right? They were hated. And these men volunteered to die for a country that did not respect or appreciate them as human beings. I don't know about you, but for me, I was like, on what fucking planet would you do that? I wouldn't do that, right? And I struggled with that for many years. Like, it's very admirable, but I wanted to know why. What was their motivation to endure so much hostility and bigotry and hatred? They couldn't even vote. Like, nobody cared about them. In fact, it was the realization by the government that they might not have enough men to fight World War II that allowed a change in the law for them even to join the military to begin with. But they seized those opportunities one at a time, even after they came in. So keep in mind the change in the law plus the results of political pressure from the Black press, civil rights groups and historically Black colleges was ultimately what pushed them into the military as well. So there's a lot of things happening that pushed and created the Tuskegee Airmen. After they get in, they endure years of inadequate training facilities, hostile leaders. A lot of people don't know that a lot of them were actually arrested at Indiana's Freeman Field when they refused to sign a base regulation that required separate officers' clubs for Black officers and white officers. Ultimately, what they ended up doing was they wrote the playbook that the civil rights movement would use to create the country that we are in right now, right? By the time the Tuskegee Airmen flew their last combat mission in April of 1945, so changes of law, crazy training events, all kinds of discrimination, they still go to war, right? They flew 15,000 sorties over 2 years in combat. They had destroyed or damaged 36 German planes in the air, 237 on the ground, and over 1,000 rail cars and transport vehicles, and a German destroyer, a whole fucking ship. 66 Tuskegee trained aviators were killed in action during that time, and 32 were captured as POWs after being shot down. Now, historically, there was this myth that in all of their escorts, they hadn't lost a single one. That actually wasn't true when they looked at the data. They actually lost 25 bombers, but compared to the 15th Air Force groups, so these were all Caucasian flying units, the Caucasian groups actually lost 46 bombers per group on average, whereas the Tuskegee Airmen lost 25. So they were still crushing their counterparts in terms of metrics. Okay. And so ultimately, after hearing all of this injustice and these stories of bigotry and the sadness that would overwhelm me sometimes, I finally had to come to the understanding and the interpretation that they did it because there was something in them that pushed them to say, this matters. There's a bigger picture at play, and we are going to seize this opportunity to create better lives for ourselves, and we are going to fulfill our life purpose. Now, other examples. The Quaker petition against slavery. 4 white Quaker men in 1688, so this is way before Lincoln, you guys, got together in Pennsylvania and decided that we think that robbing and selling men against their will is something we're not going to stand against. They wrote a petition. They presented it. It was rejected. It was considered to be too forward-leaning at the time. It took another 92 years and many more petitions to emancipate slaves in Pennsylvania in 1780. That's another example. 4 men who decided slavery is a bad thing. We don't want to put up with it. Example 3, Seneca Falls, where women asserted that we were not second-class citizens. It was a small group of women who met in Elizabeth Stanton's home, right? Think about how small the homes were back then. You really think it's going to be some massive group of women that get together to create that change? No, it always starts with one person, and then it spreads to 2, and then 4, and then movements happen. More recently, the Dakota Oil Access Pipeline project is something that you probably remember seeing in the news, right? That was put on hold after thousands of people came together to stand in solidarity and say, build your pipeline somewhere else. And that's exactly what the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers considered. They put that project on hold so they could figure out a different way of making this happen, right? Do you think that anybody in these stories were scared? Absolutely. They suffered imprisonment. Some of them were killed. They were shot. All kinds of crazy things happened. But they were guided by something much bigger. It was an internal knowing and belief that they were meant for more, that their communities deserved more, right? Now, I had a mini meltdown a couple of weeks ago. I'd been doing okay with regards to all the crazy stuff that's happening. I don't know if you can hear Lulu sleeping, but apologies for the dog snoring. Anyway, I'd been doing okay, but then one morning I wake up and I broke down, right? You can hear all about it on episode 29. I am a human being. I have my bad days too. But the truth is, my heart should break over injustice and bigotry and hate and inefficiency and lazy people. Yes, my heart should break for that, and so should yours, okay? You are a human being. It shows that you care. But what I know to be true is that there are more of us who love our communities and our families and our missions than there are of those who hate. And history has shown us over and over again that love always beats hate. But in order for us to create these changes that we know our communities deserve, we have to learn how to love ourselves first. When we can do that, then we can create the change. We can band and find other people that are like-minded, that want to improve the world, right? After that, our job is then to find each other and encourage one another along our journeys, because some days I'm going to have a bad day. Some days you're going to have a bad day. And when you're having a bad day, I'm going to speak truth to you and pump you up. And when I'm having a bad day, I'm going to call you with my ugly snot bubbles and you're going to encourage me. That's how these movements happen, right? So, my friend, super hard truth right now, and I'm really sorry to have to say this, but I just want you to accept the world as it is. You want a comfortable life, but there is no such thing. I'm sorry. When we work on our life purpose, when we achieve it, there is going to be pain. There is going to be suffering. It is going to hurt. But the options are either I experience pain and suffering by not self-actualizing and not achieving my highest potential, or I experience pain and suffering because I am achieving my highest potential. Choose your heart, right? With regards to implementing 1% improvements, it's going to bring us back to this British cycling team and Sir Brailsford, okay? Who, by the way, when I looked up his biography, never actually felt like he fit into his hometown of Derby, England. Hi, imposter syndrome much? That is literally one of the key tenets of imposter phenomenon, is that you feel like you don't fit in, you feel like you're very separate from everyone and everything around you. Initially, professionally, he was actually a drafter, which is someone who makes detailed technical drawings, like for machinery or buildings or electronics, right? He's doing something technical, decides to leave all of that to go to France, where he becomes an amateur kind of cyclist. And on that journey, he becomes fluent in French. Oh, by the way, he hated school when he was a kid, but during his time in France, he becomes an avid reader and he starts reading all these books about physiology and sports psychology, right? Later on, he gets a degree in sports and exercise sciences and then an MBA. Guys, you know, you've heard me say, when it comes to imposter syndrome, your life purpose is going to have breadcrumbs throughout your life leading you to your purpose. You think it was an accident he ended up in France and learned French high, like multiple Tour de France winners? Do you think it was an accident that of all the books he could have read, he picked up books about physiology and sports psychology? I almost can't think of anything more boring than that, besides maybe, I don't know, reading about human anatomy or something like that. I have zero interest in those things, but something drew him to all of that. So again, bringing our spiritual practice in to that, you need to decide what that means to you. To me and my practice, which you don't have to follow, but this is what I believe, is that God created him and ordered his steps and gave him free will to create this life where he could achieve and do amazing things. And all he had to do was be himself and follow his passions and work really hard and face struggle and overcome it, right? Just like every other human does. And keep in mind, can you imagine having an MBA and somehow getting the job in charge of the British cycling team? I'd be like, I have an MBA that doesn't have anything to do with cycling. My imposter syndrome would be in overdrive. We don't know all the details of how internally he was feeling when he was in the process of getting the job, offer the job, first day showing up on the team, first time at the Olympics. We don't know any of that. But his behaviors indicate that he had a highly likely chance that on some level he experienced self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So back to his three pillars, which are cornerstones to the marginal gains theory. Number one, he had a strategy. So his strategy was, if we make minor improvements every single day, eventually we're going to get on the podium. Two, human performance. He primarily focused on psychology and creating an environment for optimum performance. This is totally in your control. You can learn about your psychology. You can learn about how your brain works. You can learn how thoughts lead to emotions, which lead to behaviors, which is cognitive triangle, which I talk about in just about every podcast episode. You can learn about how if there's a behavior you don't like, there is a thought behind it that is subconscious that is dictating the emotions in your body, which dictate the behavior that you don't want, which means guess what? You can actually change your behavior and make it work for you. And I've seen this countless times with clients. I had a client today who we're halfway through her 12 sessions and she was like, "Oh my gosh, my life has completely changed through this process. I'm now no longer being emotionally run over by my thoughts. I can experience the feelings and the emotions, not be overwhelmed by them, and choose to live a different way. I can create a different reality. It's amazing. You can do the same thing too, right? Learn about the psychology. And then the second thing they mentioned with human performance was creating an environment for optimum performance. Guys, who are you spending time with? Are you spending time watching the news, which we know statistically and based on research is going to bring you down? They're experts at pushing all of those emotional buttons so that you feel overwhelmed, you feel distracted, right? Are you around people who encourage you, who uplift you, who sharpen you, right? A lot of people in this world view other people who maybe are higher achievers than they are, and they feel threatened by that. But you're not that way, humble warrior. When you see somebody who might be a little bit further ahead of you, you look at them more with this helpful jealousy where you think, man, I want what they have. How do I get that? What is it that they actually have that I want? And how do I reverse engineer it so I end up like that too? Maybe I'll take them out to coffee and pick their brain on how they did it. Maybe I'll hire a coach. Maybe I'll go to a therapist. There are a million and two resources you can use. Okay. But the point is, you are the average of the people you spend time with. So if you want to be a certain way, you can create the conditions to create that optimal outcome. Point three, continuous improvement. This is where those 1% gains come in. Strategy, human performance, continuous improvement. That's all Sir Brailsford did to get the British cycling team to be the best in the world. Okay. So for you, humble warrior, what kind of world do you want to live in? I want you to imagine what that looks like. And if you're struggling right now to imagine that, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just your body's in survival mode. So we need to get your nervous system feeling comfortable and safe again so that it can open itself up and imagine and create. Okay. Call your best friend, join a community, hit up Joyful Money Club, DM me, whatever it needs. Sometimes we need other people to come in and pull us out of that slimy pit. Okay. Two, what would need to shift in your brain in order to make that reality a reality, the dream of reality, right? What beliefs would you have to dump and what new, more empowering beliefs would you have to pick up in order to create that world? Number three, who and what do I need to be around? There's a reason why at car dealerships, their goal is to get you behind the wheel of that car as quickly as possible. Because as soon as you can feel and experience what it's like to drive that car, you are going to figure out how to pay for it, right? Oftentimes I tell clients, sometimes it doesn't matter what your financial situation is, try to create the reality of what it is that you want to build. So I have a client, she lives in a crappy apartment. Like it's really bad, you guys, but she's been tolerating the situation for a long time. When you have imposter syndrome, you are tolerating behaviors because you don't think you're worthy of anything better. I know that's a little ouch moment, but it's true. And I'm telling you because I love you and because you deserve better. Okay. So anyway, so this client has been house sitting beautiful houses, beautiful mansions. And she used to think all this stuff was so I can't talk today. She used to think these houses were so far out of reach for herself and that she didn't fit in these places. But because of this work she's been doing, she's finally come to a place of, oh, yes, I'm going to have one of these houses. These people are wonderful humans. They're not any different than I am. They're not more special. If they figured out a way to do it, I am too, because I deserve a quiet oasis of peace where I can come home and not have rats and not have drug dealers around and all kinds of other crazy experiences, right? So number three was who and what do I need to be around to create that? And sometimes you need to hire a coach to encourage you on what's possible and reflect the mirror back on what's actually possible for you. 4, looking at the British cycling team, 1% improvements every day. So you have your strategy, what world you want to live in. You know exactly what it's going to look like. Get specific. You've identified beliefs that are holding you back, and you've picked up new beliefs that are more empowering. You've also identified the community and people that you need to be around in order to create that. Okay. So, what would it take to create 1% more community today? What would you need to do to find 1% more allies? What 1% more do you need to learn to create that dream? What is one tiny thing you can do today to create that reality for someone else? Sometimes when we do something for others that we really need for ourselves, there's a magical thing that happens where we somehow end up getting that need met ourselves. Okay. I try to be really intentional about telling people the impact that they had on me. So I just came from 2 weeks of military time at another military base. And it was a time of amazing healing for me that I'm so grateful for. And it wouldn't have happened if I'd caved last year and decided to retire. And something in me, I've said in the past, if you don't feel peace, that is a yellow or red light to stop what you're doing and don't take any action until you get that peace again. I called a mentor of mine who I hadn't talked to in a while, and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about retiring." This man convinced me to stay because he can sell ice to an Eskimo. He's amazing. And I'm so thankful that he did, because not only have I been able to heal from past pains, but the work that I'm doing right now is so fulfilling and so perfect for me. I'm just pinching myself with the gratitude, the fun, and the joy that I'm having in this season. So I sent him a voice memo today and I said, "Hey, I am super thankful for the amazing kind of interaction that we had that changed the trajectory of my life. And I just want you to know the impact that you had on me. And thank you so much for letting me be vulnerable and for you speaking truth to my bullshit and speaking life into me instead, because none of this would have happened without you. Right. And letting that go and sharing that with that person with no expectation to receive anything back is one of my favorite things to do now. Now, in terms of what can you do 1% today? It wasn't that long ago that I felt a little bit helpless about some stuff happening in the world. A lot of services have been cut for the vulnerable through grants, and this has been really heartbreaking for me because I've been on the front lines of horrific abuse that is perpetrated on the most vulnerable in our societies. And the idea that our communities would not want to support them is just gut-wrenching to me. And so I was feeling a little bit helpless. I didn't know what I could do. And out of the blue, I get this Facebook message from someone that I don't know. And some weeks prior, somebody had commented about in some random group, "Hey, we're looking for Spanish linguists. If anybody speaks Spanish that might be able to help provide some translation services, please let us know." And so a lot of people had commented. I added a comment and I said, "Hey, I speak Spanish too. You have a lot of amazing volunteers, but if you need help, I'm here." So I get messaged. And this person basically said, "I'm not from your area, but I'm here because we have a court date with an immigration judge. And long story short, they were a Colombian family from like Colombia, South America. The spouse had been a member of the Colombian government, and he was one of the key officials that had tried to broker a peace with the FARC. So, for those who don't know what the FARC is, it is a narco trafficking organization, really bad, and they own vast swaths of Colombia. And so this person had been part of this process to try to broker a deal. Some stuff had gone sideways. The FARC threatened his and his family's life. So they sought asylum in the United States. They'd been here for years and they finally were getting this immigration hearing. And this person says, "Our immigration attorney said that we were good. Like we had a translator, no problem." And then lo and behold, it was the night before that they were calling me and they were saying, because grants were being cut, there was no translator available for them. And would I mind coming in? So at first, like the skeptic in me is, who is this? This is some kind of trap or something. But I had to let my fear go and trust my ability to investigate because that's something I'm really good at. I get the truth. I'm like, yes, I'll be there. And in that moment, I realized this was one way that I can support life and encourage people, right? I can't imagine being in a position where I have to flee everybody I know and everything I love because mine and my family's life is being threatened. Actually, I can't imagine that. I've been in situations where I had to deal with corrupt cops and I feared for my family's life, not my life. You can kill me all day and like whatever, but my family, oh yeah, that terrified me at the time. And with that being said, you can be the 1% improvement. You just have to make yourself willing and available to help your community in whatever way feels most authentic to you. Now, a final story to encourage you in terms of what one person can do. So you guys have heard me talk about Operation Keiki Shield and Operation Shine the Light and some of the other operations that I've done historically to protect children from sexual exploitation. And a lot of people see the success of that. I think I just heard that they did Operation Keiki Shield 23 or 24 or something like that. I don't really keep up with all that, but I heard it through the grapevine. Anyway, so it is incredible to me that they continue to do this work. But when people ask me how we created that, I tell them about how it started with me and 4 other people, right? So out of the sea of law enforcement agencies and everybody who paid a lot of really good lip service, there were less than 5 people who really wanted to get this thing off the ground. And we experienced all kinds of opposition, all kinds of law enforcement agencies and senior government leaders telling us not only that we weren't capable of being successful, but they were actively throwing up roadblocks to stop us from protecting kids, by the way. Insane. And so when I tell people that, I remind them that one person can change the world. And so, my friend, I want to remind you today, ultimately, that joy is an act of resistance. Living your life the best you possibly can is an act of resistance. Your enemies want to confuse and distract you. They want you to make you think that you can't. But out of curiosity, why do you think someone would expend energy on someone who's weak? The answer is they wouldn't. And so if people are messing with you, you have to acknowledge that you are way more powerful than you give yourself credit for. Okay? So you can choose now to let them distract you, or you can stay focused on your life purpose. And some of you are still seeing the good in people who don't deserve it, by the way. I'm sorry, it's another truth bomb. I've got them all day today. Okay? Narcissists continue to do heinous and evil things because we cling to the hope that they can change. Psychology Today and other experts on narcissism actually talk about this. They say that failing to recognize a narcissist for what they are and hoping that they'll change literally leads to depression, domestic violence, and all kinds of other problems. So when someone tells you who they are, you believe them, okay? So this was me for a long time. I'm not preaching something that I haven't experienced for myself. I made excuses for them all over the place because I hope deep down that the good in them would overcome and prevail. That's just not true. There is a small percentage of people that are evil, plain and simple, okay? Ultimately, seize your joy, my friend. There is nothing that will piss the opposition off more than you living your best life and finding others just like you who are powerful and empathetic and banding together. And if you need help finding a like-minded community that is going to help you understand your true worth, I've got the Joyful Money Club going. You can email me at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com if you want to join. It's $49 a month, really minimal investment. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Humble Warriors, I need you to remember the world needs who you were made to be. Thank you so much for learning with me today on how you can make your imposter syndrome work for you. I love you. I will see you next time. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at Alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI at mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.